Let's do that. So, yeah, welcome everyone to our latest EX Space Expert Insights webinar. We'll do intros in a moment to Lisa. Really looking forward to this session. We're focusing today on the art or science or bit of both of service design, which is closely associated. We talk a lot around design thinking and design principles within the EX space, and indeed we have a fantastic flagship course, the EX Designer, now live for those of you that are interested in design thinking and using that for EX. But we haven't really shone the spotlight in great depth on service design as a kind of specialism within that. So really looking forward to getting our teeth into that today. The format as usual, Lisa will do intros in a moment. Then Lisa will kick in with a presentation and take you through the fundamentals of service design and a little bit deeper. And then we'll have time at the end for live questions. As you're going through the session, please feel free to use the chat functionality here within Zoom to drop in any questions or reflections or comments. Katie, myself and Emma will be keeping tracks of that as we're going, and we may interject with the odd question also, but definitely we'll keep time at the end for any questions or reflections you might want to share. I think that's it. Key things. I should say, EX Space, for those of you that don't know it, we have recently launched our 100% free membership plan. So you can now sign up for the EX Space for our entry-level essentials package, which is a completely free subscription. No credit card details required now. I hear a big hoorah on that. Just sign up on the website and you'll be able to access all our mailing lists, a load of free goodies, and then you'll be able to see everything else that you can kind of pay as you go and buy once you're in there, and lots of great design thinking goodies as well. So please check that out if you're not already a member. Katie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lee. So as you should probably already know, as you've signed up for this session today, we're joined by the very lovely Lisa Morris. So a little bit about Lisa. So as a seasoned designer and strategic leader, Lisa thrives on crafting innovative solutions that marry creativity with strategy, but overall are grounded in human experience research. With over 30 years experience at prestigious consultancies like Accenture and smaller design firms, she's honed her skills at the intersection of creativity and business, leveraging degrees in communication and organizational behavior. And Lisa, we kind of got connected via Emma. So Emma, do you want to say a little bit about her?
Yeah, I think Lisa, you and I met on LinkedIn, didn't we? I think we connected on LinkedIn.
Yes, initially. Yeah.
But sometimes LinkedIn is a force for good as well as a force for evil. But no, I think, some good things come out of LinkedIn, hence our connection. And you helped Belinda and I with the second edition of EX by Design. You reviewed some of the work in that. So thank you for your contribution to that. So yeah, that's where we first met. So yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you both. So Lisa, I'm going to hand over to you. I know you've got some content to share with us, some slides to share. So I will put myself on mute. I'll stop talking and I will hand over the reins.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, I'm so honored to be here to have this lovely audience today to talk about what is a really passion area for me. Whether it's design or employee experience, it's sort of the boat. They don't seem to be separated in my life. So thank you for having me. And I'm going to just jump in. I'm going to start with sharing some slides. And we've got a big crowd, which I'm very grateful for. So we're going to try and keep this content oriented and lots of Q&A. So if you have any questions, again, feel free to jot them down, put them in the chat, and we hope to return to them as quickly as possible. So service design and blueprinting is the topic for our conversation today. I don't have to tell myself about you anymore because the EX Space team has done a wonderful job of that. I would just say that I've been doing this work for some time now. And quite frankly, I was introduced to service design through a wonderful colleague of mine at a smaller design shop. And it really has made a huge impact in how I think about employee experience. And that's a little bit of the thinking that I'm going to share with you today. So Again, thank you for having me. Let's dive right into it. And like we do in all human-centered design work, at least I do, let's ground ourselves a little bit in needs and wants of our actual employees. That's what we're here to talk a little bit about. And if we just take for a moment and have a very simplistic perspective or view, employees, just like paying customers, although the money is exchanged differently, they want offerings that an organization promotes, maybe part of their brand or their employee value proposition or whatever the case may be. And they're actually exchanging something, their energy, their talents, their abilities, be part of something to receive something of value. So there is a co-creation, there's a exchange that's happening. And while those tangible, if you will, elements of the exchange are very important to them, they equally want great experiences around those exchanges. So I'm sure I haven't told you anything new, except maybe to introduce this concept of co-creation, co-creating value, a value exchange, if you will. Okay. And so if you think a little bit about why we're here to talk about this, we've grounded ourselves in people. So why service design for EX? Why not just use design thinking, if you will? That's a muddy topic in and of itself, but let's start here. I think we can all appreciate that organizations are really complex systems. In fact, they're ecosystems, if you think a little bit more deeply about them. They're a configuration of people, technologies, and other resources that are interacting, and there's multiple service systems that are creating this mutual sense of value. And so think of it as lots of people playing a lot of different roles. And we call these roles, at least in service design, actors. And actors are sort of consumers of things and they're providers of things. And they could actually be doing those roles simultaneously, right? And so in this case, again, we have actors who are using their knowledge and their skills for the benefit of another actor. So we're sharing our skills, if you will, and our knowledge with each other in organizations. And this exchange among these actors, right? And so voila, this is service design, because service design is what we call based in service dominant logic. How many of you have service dominant logic? Does anyone know the background of that? Yeah, thank you. So service dominant logic is basically based in behavioral economics. It's an alternative framework for explaining value creation through exchange. So that's essentially what the service dominant logic really means. And a dominant logic is sort of a way to relate to a means in which a company makes money. So there's many different means, but this is based on service. And the underlying, if you will, idea around service dominant logic is that humans apply their competencies to benefit others and reciprocally benefit from others by the others' applied competencies. So this is like a service for service exchange, if you will. And so if you think a little bit more deeply about service design and the axioms around those assumptions around service design logic, you can't but argue that this actually is very relatable to employee experience. If you think a little bit about these axioms, right? Service as the primary fundamental basis of exchange, we just talked about. Value that is co-created by lots of different people interacting with each other, and of always including at least one beneficiary of the interaction. The value is always uniquely and phenomenologically, if you will, that's a tough word to say sometimes, determined by the beneficiary. How many times have we seen that there's some aspect of what we design that some employees love, and there's some aspect of it that some don't like? And so it's all about the whole idea of beauty in the eye of the beholder. Well, this is value in the eye of the beneficiary, if you will. And then finally, there is co-creation, and this co-creation is coordinated by what we call actor-generated institutions. And when you think of institutions, you think organization. But in this case, think less about organization and think about these humanly devised rules, norms, and beliefs that enable or constrain action. So that kind of feels like culture, people, right? And so it's a little bit about how are these devised rules, norms, and beliefs that are humanly oriented, how are these things arranged? And so to me, this feels less superficial. It's much more, it helps me get a better sense for the dynamics and, quite frankly, the complexity in what we're designing when we think about employee experience. But service design is so very applicable to employee experience, and that's really what I want to shed some light on today. So you might be asking yourself, what the heck is service design, right? Well, there's lots of conversation, as there always is in the design world. Some people think about it as a mindset, like we do maybe with design thinking or human-centered design. Some people think of it as an approach, a process, a tool set, a cross-disciplinary language. People always say to me, like, wait, it's service design. Why are we talking about experience? Well, let's just be honest. Service, product, experience, it doesn't really matter to the people who are receiving it. It's service design, kind of the way we think about it. It's service design more because it's that co-creation, that exchange, if you will. And one of the most, I think, beneficiary elements of service design, it's intensely practical, it's very pragmatic, and it's inherently holistic. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of these concepts of front stage and backstage and an end-to-end experience with multiple stakeholders, and not just one moment, but multiple moments, and this idea that has to fit into business needs. Doesn't that sound like what we have to design in employee experience? I mean, let's all put our hands up for like what that feels like. It's challenging, multiple people, multiple stakeholders, multiple elements to design. So service design, as you can see, one of my favorite definitions of service design, and this is actually penned by some deep experts in the service design space. But service design is really what helps us not only design the service, but the experience around the service. And equally important, it's also about designing how the service gets delivered. So it's not only talking about like what wonderful thing do we want to put on the front stage, but how do we organize and choreograph the backstage, which is equally important in sustaining, if you will, an employee experience across an enterprise, right? So it's human-centered design at the end of the day. It's about designing a service or services. And it's also about thinking about the experience that one has as a consumer and the experience that one has as a provider. We all know in the space of employee experience, where we're looking at it, whether we're looking at it through a customer experience lens or a true employee experience lens, if the people who are providing the experience are not having a great experience themselves, it's very difficult for those on the other end to feel like they're having a great experience. So we are tying, if you will, the experience with the delivery. That's the key aspect of service design. Okay. Why is it a game changer for employee experience? If I can get my slide to go. Applied service design helps us see the world from different actors' point of view. We know we have multiple actors in employee experience, more so than even straight up traditional customer experience. We're using it to help us intentionally design or configure all these interactions. And it's a configuration of where co-creation happens. So that's really when we think about interaction and exchange, it's really about co-creating at that point of view. It helps us choreography, as I talked about earlier, all the elements of experience. And this is one of the key factors. You can apply service design in what we call internal customer experience. So HR providing services, if you will, to their customers internally. You can think about it applied in the external customer experience space, where the employees are the provider of service to an external customer, or you can think about it in both spaces. So extremely agile, if you will, extremely applicable in the space. All right, so that's service design in a nutshell. It's human-centered design at the end of the day, but it's very, very intently focused on not only the consumer experience, but the provider experience, okay? Which I think is absolutely critical in employee experience. And there are many methods in employee experience to use. I'm going to highlight for you one of the prominent ones in service design, which we call experience or service blueprinting. How many of you have done journey mapping? Hands up. Yeah, lots of hands up. How many have done service blueprinting? Yeah, so some of us have done it. Awesome. So just in a nutshell, what service blueprinting does for us, or experience blueprinting, as you can see from this lovely image that I have so kindly copied, is that it helps us produce a visual map, if you will, of how your organization delivers the experience of the service offering. If you can see the top, if you will, of the mound, that's the front stage, right? That's the end-to-end, if you will, of an experience. But equally so, service service blueprinting and service design are focused on designing that what we call surface to, or core to surface, or surface to core. What's happening below, if you will, behind, if you will, the experience. And so experience or service blueprinting is a great visual map. It's a great method to help us look at experience and delivery together. If one's not working, the other's not working. And it doesn't really matter whether it's the front stage or the backstage. Have you ever been to a theater show, for example, and it's just not working for you? Basically what that's telling you is something's off. Either the front stage is not coordinated or designed for a great experience, or there's something happening in the backstage which is not enabling the front stage to give the performance that was intended, right? So we're connecting experience on the front stage and experience in the backstage. And the beautiful thing about service blueprinting is it keeps us very focused on people, right? So that is really the critical element. So again, you can look at it from a journey perspective, but more importantly, you can look at it from both perspectives. What's the journey? And then behind the scenes, who are the underlying people? What are the policies, the processes, the systems, and the touch points that create the resulting experience? So again, end-to-end, surface to core, that's what blueprinting is all about. And it helps us deliver on the essentials for improving current state experiences or designing new ones. So I think implicit is that you can ultimately see the value of this ready. It really sort of allows us to help our customers look at how our customers experience what we deliver, right? Enabling you to be able to think about how might we deliver this better. If you're just designing experiences and not thinking about the delivery, sometimes it feels very disjointed. You're like, okay, great, that looks wonderful. Now, how the hell do we deliver that on a scalable level, repeatable level? And if you don't design the delivery of it, your vision is sort of out. It's no longer placed, if that makes any sense. The value of blueprinting can also help us just look at how we might improve internal operations as much as improving experiences. And then finally, as I talked about, it's very flexible. You can look at the beneficiary. You can look at any beneficiary you want, but also look at the provider. So this lens, if you will, that you choose to use helps you in terms of figuring out what's happening on the front stage and what's happening underneath it, right? And if we think a little bit about internal processes and systems, which we're all probably very familiar with given this space, if those are any way constrained, you are constraining then the success of any interaction or experience. So I think we know that intuitively, we feel that in many cases where the two are not connected, that's where, if you will, the breakdown happens in experience. Make sense? Makes sense. Pretty straightforward, yeah? So what do we blueprint? When do we blueprint? So when can we blueprint? Let's start there. If you think a little bit about the dynamic design process, we always sort of see it linearly. I've tried to make it a little bit more dynamic here. But you are potentially blueprinting when you're thinking about what's happening in the current state experience or what's happening in the current state delivery. Or you might be using it when you're thinking about what could the future state look like? What does the design of the experience look like? What does the design of the backstage look like? And so you can use it in current state blueprinting or future state blueprinting, just like you can use journey mapping. You can look at a journey map to understand the current state experience. You can look at it to design the future state. Just a moment of caution, right? So what is different is that a blueprint and a journey map, they're different. They're not used for the same purpose. If you want to get really deeply connected to somebody's journey, then you want to look at a journey map. If you want to get very deeply connected and get a detailed view on what's producing the experience, that surface to core, then you want to do blueprinting, which is a very thin slice of the journey, but more deeply understanding what's happening behind the scenes, if you will, or below that line of interaction, as we sometimes call it. So what do we blueprint? Let's talk about that. Here are some lovely visuals to help you understand kind of the orchestration, if you will, that happens, right? So we have lots of things happening on the front stage, whether we're looking at true customer experience or whether we're thinking about employee experience and how a lot of parts of the organizations help us create that front stage experience for employees, right? So we can see the front stage, we can see the backstage, and then we have to get clear about what's happening behind the scenes, if you will, to enable, if you will, the backstage and the front stage. All right. So when you're blueprinting, if you will, employee experience, you're thinking about who are the roles, where are the primary actors, where are the secondary actors, what processes are we involving, what tools are being used, what technology is being used to enable it, what are the touch points that are happening between these interactions, and what are the policies, if you will, governing these interactions, right? So we're able to visualize it. I will get to what a blueprint looks like here in a moment. I'm sure you're wondering. So imagine a simple stage of the theater, which I've kind of reflected on a little bit, as we can see here. The front stage is where all the action happens and what the audience can see. It's what your customers, if you will, whether internal customers or external customers, that's what they see, right? The backstage is where all the props are, the lights, the sets, the crew doing all their wonderful work. And pretty much in many cases should be invisible, if you will, to the audience. Additionally, there's just always going to be something happening beyond, if you will, what you can see. So, for example, like in real life, those who go to see the theater have a life outside of the theater. So do organizations, right? And so do those interactions. So if you think a little bit about what organizations deal with behind the scenes of the organization, that's where culture comes into play. That's where beliefs come into play, values, the environment, budget constraints, and any other limitations, if you will, that impact the backstage operational experience delivery. So again, very, very relatable, if you will, to employee experience. So finally, what does a blueprint actually look like? There's many different views of a blueprint, but more importantly, it's sort of like, what does it generally include? There's always the getting steeped in the scenario. What exactly are we looking at? What experience are we looking at? Which scenario we're looking at? So that's the first thing we want to get clear about. Then each scenario, if you will, has an experience that generally happens over time. So we think of those in phases. And just like we do in journey mapping, we break down a blueprint in the phases that we want to look at. And then finally, as we can see here, the first sort of layout is, what are the steps that this particular customer takes, right? So from left to right, what we're going to see in detail is the customer scenario broken down into high-level experience lifecycle phases, if you will, that are detailed in linear steps. I think we're all familiar with that because of journey mapping, and I know a lot of hands have gone up. The next thing for us to do then is to go from top to bottom. So generally speaking, you lay out the steps because you can essentially take a journey map and begin to look at it in more detailed view. So having those journeys and those steps or actions, then you go top to bottom in every one of the actions. You don't want to go across. You want to take it action. If you will lay out all the actions, then go looking at the layers of the blueprint so that you can look at the details of each step of the scenario, surface to core, right? So you're looking at, what are the processes? Sorry, who are the people? What are the policies? What are the processes? What are the systems at play? Where are the touch points happening? And what is that resulting experience? And you can see, like in this particular example of this blueprint, you can see that there might be some hidden steps, so steps that don't actually get visible to a customer, if you will, or any internal customer in our case. And you can use black to show some of that. You could use your own color coding, but you can notice that there's all these layers. So that's really what a blueprint looks like. It may look complicated, but at the end of the day, so much of us are familiar with journey mapping. And in many ways, we've been unable to figure out, where is the invisible stuff? What is that invisible thing that's fighting the experience to not actually happen as we intended? That's what's happening behind the scenes. This gives us visibility to that. These are blueprints with layers, if you will, of experience delivery. All right. So that's a little bit about blueprinting. It's quite, while it looks complex, it's very sequential. So you go through, lay out your journey, then you have a very collaborative conversation. So these are all meant to be research-based and very cross-functional collaborations, because as we know, if we even took an onboarding experience, there are many parties in that experience. We have human resources, we have maybe recruitment that may not be part of human resources, we have managers playing a role, we have IT playing a role, we have facilities playing a role. And so together we create this blueprint to know how we might, if you will, think of opportunities to improve the experience when it's current state, or look about how we might coordinate better in future state, right? So when you think a little bit about blueprinting, you again have this opportunity to blueprint current state or blueprint future state. And it's very much aligned with the design process. In current state, we might choose a scenario to blueprint, pulling it out of the journey map, breaking down the steps, if you will, blueprinting each of the scenarios that we just talked about. And really, ultimately, once we get all those layers figured out, what we're trying to figure out is where do questions lie that we don't have information to? What are the critical moments of breakdown? What ideas might we have to actually improve those experiences, those interactions? That's what we're going to pull some insight from, and then we're going to figure out our iterative brainstorming ideation process to actually figure out how to make that better. And then in future state, if we're using blueprint for future stating, we're understanding that current state. We're taking a current state blueprint, we're trying to figure out where it's breaking down. We're looking at the future state of the experience again, trying to harvest our blueprint, if you will, to create a plan of action, right? And use that to help us also think about how we might implement this in a more scalable, sustainable way, right? So don't forget to do your research, and definitely don't forget to assemble your cross-functional team. That's really, really critical, right, to all of this. All right, enough blah, blah, blah from me. I love to just stop sharing, have a wonderful conversation with all you, have some reflection. That's where the fun in these conversations actually really lies for me. So I'd love to hear questions or reflections, or maybe how you use service design in employee experience. Anything you can share or ask would be a lovely interaction for me.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That is absolutely brilliant. And yes, so anybody that has any questions, pop them into the chat, and we can either come to you, or if you'd rather not come off mute and you'd rather just keep your question in the chat, I can obviously share that with Lisa. Just out of curiosity, really, who on the call is currently using service design? Is anybody already using service design? Either pop your hands up, or yeah, I've got a couple of hands up. Yeah. Okay, so there's a few of you already using that, so that's really interesting. Thank you. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Matt, Max, you've put a couple of questions in. Would you like me to ask those to Lisa, or did you want to come off mute and ask those questions?
I wanted to say hi to Lisa. Hi, Lisa. How's it going?
Hi, Max. How are you? Good, good.
Great. This was awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess one of my questions was on current state, because actually this was something I learned today. Would you recommend it be an opportunity to do a safari walk, or even getting people that are outside of, even if you assemble a cross-functional team, would you recommend, if you're trying to identify some pain points and it's hard for the team to see when you're putting together a current state blueprint, would you recommend doing something along those lines to identify pain points and challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think of a blueprint as almost a documentation or visualization of your research. So, so yeah, anything that you can use as the intake, if you will, for understanding this, and then using the blueprint to visualize, because I think the visualization of all of that is really helpful for people to connect dots. Make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
I think you had another question. Do I consider this a tool within design thinking? How do I describe this? Answer, yes. I think of service design as its own applied design practice, if you will. Design thinking is kind of run through all of that. It's just a way, I think of design thinking as the way designers think to tackle a problem. So yes, answer yes. Hopefully that helps answer that question for you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So yes, please do put other questions in the chat, or raise your hand if you'd like to ask Lisa a question directly. Lee, I'm going to come to you in a moment, but I won't put you on the spot just yet. One thing, Lisa, obviously we do or use a lot of design thinking in EX design, and the questions that always come up for us are things like, how long would it typically take from that starting point to implementation and testing and iteration? And the other question that comes up a lot is, who should we speak to? How many people should we speak to make sure that we're doing this the right way and are fully informed? So what are your thoughts on that?
We use this thing called constraints in design. So You're not going to love my answer because it all depends. But equally so, I think I'm at a stage right now where I used to ideally be like, oh, gotta have everybody involved, blah, 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 blah. It's just not realistic. It's not realistic. So I think there's different views, if you will. Create something, maybe using some assumptions, go test it. Don't go do it without testing it. The number, when we do user experience research or user research, even in the UX world, usually say talk to 8 to 10 people, you kind of figure out where the main challenges are. So you just need to figure out where your saturation point is of data. If you continue to hear the same stuff, you've talked too long. Research plans that say we're going to go talk to 100 people don't make sense to me anymore. Research plans that say I'm going to start talking to 10 people, I'm going to figure out if I still have some questions, and then I'm going to go talk to more. Or if the 10 people have completely varying points of view, I'm going to go and figure out how to talk to more people to see if there's more themes. It's not one of those this works for all situations, but I would just say in my experience that I used to go out and be like, I got to talk to these people. I need, 10 weeks of research. And people will look at me like, are you like crazy? Like, when do you think that's ever going to happen? Right. And so what I learned to say is let me talk to enough to get a cross representation, but not boiling the ocean. And then figure out what I don't know or learn, what I haven't learned yet, and then go do some more. So in terms of like beginning to end, it can go as quickly as you want it to do, or it can go as slowly as the organization needs it to go. So I kind of like to, there isn't a one size fits all, but what I would just say is like, don't overcomplicate it. It's very easy for us to overcomplicate this because we think it's a new space. I think you have to take as much as you can get and try to demonstrate its value versus talk to its value. And I think every element in the design process in and of itself delivers value. Don't think about it as end to end. Think about what outcome am I trying to get right now? And how do I deliver that in the most effective and efficient way? So if you're in research, your outcome isn't a new designed experience. The research is to understand what are the needs of the people and how much information do I have that informs me of that. Check, I'm done. Then I move on if I get what I need there. So I think those are just ways I kind of break it down, if you will. Love the question, Katie, just to like make it more practical and pragmatic, because we don't all live in an ideal state where we're like, oh, we're just designers and we just do this end to end all day long. Not in business, I don't think, unfortunately. We have to prove our value, make it swift, have some metrics that show outcomes. And so I think that's kind of the approach that I've learned to take. I was very, very idealistic when I started.
I was going to say very much the same thing, that one of the things that we say the most is let's take a pragmatic approach to this. Let's be pragmatic about this. We say that all the time because, like you say, you could speak to loads of people, but will you get any more value from that? Not necessarily. So no, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I think the biggest thing to stay true is to a very people-centric point of view, because what quickly can happen sometimes when we get lost in the process is we don't understand that we're actually had a business lens on and not a people lens on.
Yeah.
Because we have to play, in many cases, those dual roles. So I think that's where I see more of the challenge, that mindset that we think we're deeply steeped in, that somehow kind of comes in and like unconsciously gets us focused on a lot of business stuff that, I don't know, there's some value in it. But if it's the only way, then we're kind of back to the world before this, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great question.
Eric, you've got your hand up. If you want to.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Eric from Land O'Lakes here. Lisa, thanks a lot for bringing us through your presentation. Land O'Lakes uses this process. We've done it a couple of times in the last couple of years, and I see a couple of my colleagues on the call here too. My question for you is specifically to the service blueprinting current state part of this process. As you kind of explained, it can get really complicated and kind of confusing to create that because you can include so many factors, right, based on the research we've done with our employees. So my question for you is, what's one kind of guiding question you would suggest we keep in mind as we're creating a current state blueprint to help make sure we're producing an effective tool, right? So like, what's the one question to kind of guide our thinking and check back in with as we go in many different directions with our thoughts and try to create just a good blueprint?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It can get very complicated. What I would say is service blueprinting, if you think about the primary as what are the primaries? If you choose primary, you're going to hit 80%. And just like everything else, we're not looking for 100%. We're never going to uncover it. It'll uncover over time. It's never going to be uncovered in a blueprint. It's going to be uncovered once you do a version of it, once you actually use it to design the delivery or experience, the rest of it will unfold. So focus on primary as the criteria. If you're trying to find every single nook and cranny, blah, 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 focus on the primary, everything else will fall out from there, or rise up, if you will, from there.
Great. Thank you very much. It does. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, we're great at trying to document every single possibility because that's the world we live in. But that's not going to be helpful for change. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Do keep your questions coming. Lee, I'm going to hand over to you now for any thoughts, reflections, or maybe you've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Lisa, that was great. I'm a sucker for a good metaphor, and I love this metaphor, this kind of theatre metaphor that's at the heart of your session. I love the fact that there's actors, there's props, there's a kind of front and back stage, there's the acts which you can link to your life cycle stages. There's the kind of storytelling and narrative bit to it. The one bit I don't like with that metaphor is the kind of concept of an audience, and this is something as an internal communicator that I'm quite passionate about. We use this term audience, and it suggests a few things. It suggests kind of passive spectators on one hand, and it suggests that we're in the business of sort of entertaining on the other. So I suppose my question is a bit of an observation there, but my question is around any tips for how you strike the right balance between that kind of choreography and the kind of perfectly written play on one hand, and the kind of the need for improvisation and flexibility and audience, if I dare use that word, audience participation on the other hand? I'd love your thoughts on that, really.
Yeah, two things. One, I absolutely agree with you on the metaphor. It works pretty well for 90% of it, and that audience part is But equally so, in experience, you can't actually have an experience if you're not engaged. So if you think about the audience, the experience is happening in their mind, just like our experiences happen in our minds, right? And so if you could just let the metaphor go there and not ultimately to like, oh, I'm sitting in something and just soaking it up, because you're actually not. The experience is happening in the mind, which is based on past experience. So your mind is very equally engaged and busy, even though you think you're just a recipient of something, right? So you can't have experience if you're not in this engaging space. Otherwise you would say, I went to the theater, but I don't remember any of it, which is likely not going to happen, right? So I agree with you. It kind of gives this passive, where I'm trying to really articulate the idea that we're in an exchange. You know, the thing about service, the word service, is don't go to services yet. Think of the word service. Service is an economic exchange. That's what's happening. We're exchanging, in many cases, an employee experience. Employees are exchanging their competencies, their capabilities for something else. They're giving up something they value. Maybe it's time at home with family or whatever. They're going to work, and this is the exchange that we're trying to get. And again, some of this exchange happens up here, and not so much is it tangibly out there in the ether, so to speak.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think it works in some cases because we both could go to the same theater, and you could say, I absolutely loved it, and I would walk out and say it was horrible. Horrible. Yeah. I didn't enjoy it at all. And that's that alignment with how do I see it? How did I view it? What past experiences have maybe shaped how I feel about it? Maybe I went to the theater a few days before and it was just a completely different show, if you will. But again, to your point, yes, I agree the metaphor works equally, but the audience piece is challenging. Think about it more as it is being designed for purpose, with the idea that the audience has many different values, and we're trying to figure out which value we can strike to reach the most.
Yeah,
If that makes sense.
it does. And I'll probably add to that. I think, you know, it's a heads and it's a hearts thing. I think the emotional, and this is again where I love the kind of the theatre metaphor. Great shows that I've seen, like I went to see Hamilton last week, right? And it's brilliant. There was an element of surprise there, a different type of delivery, very contemporary, a brilliant story, bit of history, but really it was an emotional journey, and that's the key to this, isn't it? As much as the kind of rational component, it's engaging people's hearts as well as their heads. So yeah, I love
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to play with that metaphor and take that away and flex that. And yeah, it's great. Really good one. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just looking at questions, Heidi has asked here, Lisa, do you have any advice for people who are working as a junior in UX or product design and want to transition into service design? Any tips there?
Yeah, I mean, there's some amazing certifications. I would almost just start there that give you, you know, the thinking will be very similar. I think maybe the one difference in service design is that it's very, how would I say this? You got to get your business acumen hat on big time, right? Because service design is about implementing it in a really live organization, right? And so your systems thinking needs to come on as a way of thinking, and your business hat needs to come on. There's a wonderful certification. I took it myself. It's called This is Service Design Doing. They're a fabulous team of very experienced professionals who will give you some insight into, you know, the added advantage, if you will, of service design, because product design and UX design are all baked, if you will, in the way designers think. This will allow you to understand the delivery elements, the operational aspects, which typically aren't part of product and UX. It's almost like how do you get an organization to run this when they're all in different roles? And there's others who might add something to that, but I think you're in a great place, and it's just another, if you will, perspective to gain that would add value. And I don't think it's a massive transition for somebody who actually has that background already. It's just a matter of whether you are very fascinated by the aspect of interaction design in its most technical sense, or industrial design for a product, versus thinking about how you have to design orchestration, if you will, in an organization, which, as we all know, is fundamentally complex and challenging. People used to say to me, customer experience is tough, and I would be like, go try employee experience. And they'd be like, why? And I'm like, well, your customers don't live in your organization. These people do, and they can see everything and they feel everything. So I'm not as cynical anymore, but I still think employee experience is challenging for the reasons we talked about.
Brilliant, thank you. Also, Emma put in the chat a bit earlier on the fact that we do talk about service design as part of our EX designer course on the EX space.
Yeah, so just to butt in there, we as you know, Lisa, we updated the second edition of EX by Design BNI with to include service design and to use this great tool. So we are fans, you know, the way we come at employee experience is to beg, borrow and steal from anything that's useful. So there's a bit of service design, there's a bit of design thinking, there's a bit of agile, there's a bit of systems thinking, there's a bit of positive psychology. And I think that's the beauty, is to kind of think what tools are most helpful. And I think for me, you know, I absolutely love service design blueprints because it gets you into the detail, and it feels, it's a very pragmatic process to follow, and it gets the right people in the room, and it helps you to ask the right questions. So I think to go from, as you said, a journey map where you figure out those actions you want to look at, and then take that, and then you get really into the detail and really figure that out. And I like the fact that it's very focused on the delivery side as well, which I think, as you said, is really important. So yeah, we've got it on the EX designer course. We talk about this whole subject, and there's some examples in there. We use onboarding, which I think is often a very broken experience, broken moments in there, and actually works really, it's a really great way to illustrate how this works, how the blueprint works, because it's very rational using something like onboarding, right? But I just wondered, I think we've got time, a little bit of time. Can you give us an example of where you've used service design blueprints and it's worked really well? Have you got something you can bring it to life with?
Yeah, so I've worked with Coca-Cola a lot. They're one of my key clients, and we were designing a brand new alumni experience. So if you think about, not as many maybe in other parts of the world are familiar with what we call alumni experience in the US, but usually what happens is once employees leave, there's obviously a relationship that has started, and that relationship can continue even though people are not associated with the same organization any longer. And so in the US, a lot with professional services typically, or where there's massive benefit from staying connected with candidates, either for boomerang from a recruiting perspective, or just business development, or all those other things. So there's definitely a business value aspect to it. And for alumni, if you can keep it rather interesting, educational, and keep it so such that they continue to gain from the organization, it's a wonderful thing to have. So just a little bit of a preface there. But the thing of it is that when you're creating something new, you have to figure out how to continue to create that experience. And so blueprinting for the future state gets all the key players in the room who will have a key role in the experience deliver to know what their role is and to know when it's time to play their song or their note or whatever the case may be. And so in that case, you're designing, oh, the wonderful experience looks like this, but the big question for a business is, great, looks sexy, can't wait to have it. How much is it going to cost to run it? Who's going to have to be involved? What are they going to have to do? How does that change their work? And so a blueprint helps us answer all of those really critical questions. And I dare say that in a lot of cases for employee experience, those who are designing the experience, whether it's a process owner, if you will, or experience owner, depending on how and where the organization is in their maturity towards that, a lot of, without even changing the actions in the journey, if we just figured out how we connect the dots below it, the experience itself might improve. Because so many times, even in onboarding, right, Emma, it's really that the left hand and the right hand aren't talking to each other, or they're not coordinated to come into the show at the right time. And so it's like, it's like when somebody comes on the stage, they're not supposed to be there yet. Or like we all do when we're all singing a song and somebody decides to start the hymn a little bit sooner than it's supposed to. Is like, they made a mistake. This is the orchestration of all those points equally. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah. And what I love about not just this tool, but many tools from service design and design thinking is they kind of hold your hand to do the right thing without you having to think about everything. Straight away you're following, as you said, you get all the different kind of players, actors in the room, and it's very natural because you're following this kind of process and it's very pragmatic. Whereas if you haven't got that, you kind of sat there thinking, okay, I've got to, look at alumni experience or whatever, or onboarding experience. And, you might forget about certain departments and teams. And then I think actually Janet made a comment about internal comms, often the last people to be brought into the redesign of any experience. They go, I wish we'd been involved from the beginning. So it kind of leads you very seamlessly to do the right things, which is one of the things I love about these tools. So thank you for that. I'm going to hand back over to you.
No worries. And just to add to that point you just made, Emma, Max has popped into the chat that he finds that the process really helps supporting both intentionality and consistency as well, which absolutely links to the point you just made. So fabulous. Well, we are coming towards the end of the session. If there are any last minute questions, if you pop your hand up, we could probably squeeze one more quick one in. Oh, Lisa, was that your hand? Was there something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, some of us are part of global organizations where the delivery is happening. Maybe I think a little bit about my background, like, typically we would say, oh yeah, that looks like the experience we want to create. But the people who actually are delivering it are in really different roles depending on the country or the business unit or that case. That actually also allows us to adapt a desired experience for who's going to actually deliver it so that we can get much closer to what their experience is. And don't forget that this blueprint can be look, it all depends on who you're looking at it for. If you think about the people on the backstage, you can flip it around and say, let's look at their experience. Where are they struggling? And so how do we help them equally so? So by easily flipping that perspective, you're actually designing a better experience for those people who are providing the experience. Sometimes we ask too much from the people on the delivery side. Use 10 systems to answer a customer question. Can you use this process map and this process map, because we haven't had time to glue it all together. So we're asking people to make these, to navigate and to bring together, where actually that is what's destroying their experience. And then that has a domino effect, if you will, to the others' experiences. So again, even if it's used for like teaming and teamwork, you'd be amazed at how much it can help people see the opportunity that lies for change.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Lisa. That's a really nice way for us to kind of round up actually the session. It's been really good, really informative. Lots of great conversation and thoughts in the chat as well. So thank you to everybody that's joined us today. Lee, shall I hand over to you to kind of close us down and
yeah, sounds good, Katie. Lisa, big thanks to you. That was great. Thanks for enlightening us on service design and introducing me to that wonderful metaphor, which I'm going to have a lot of fun with now. Thanks to everyone who dialed in from Nigeria, from the US, from Paris, France, from all over the place. A really great turnout today, so thank you. We've got just about to launch a series of 3 webinars called our summer series, which we'll be unveiling soon. Not quite ready just yet, but if you sign up for the EX Space on the link in the chat or www.theex.space, just click the link there, sign up for free, and we can send you details on that. It's a series of 3 webinars that we'll be running over the next month and a half or so. The first one is on AI, looking at called Bots, Brawn and Brains, embracing the world of AI and the future of work. We've got the next one, which is on putting people at the heart of change, so kind of people-centric or human-centered change. And then we're bringing it all together with a third webinar, which will be about the age of disruption and how the workplace has changed and is changing massively right now, and what that whole new world of work looks like. So 3 interlinked webinars coming up during the summer months. Make sure you're on the list to be included in those, but we look forward to sharing details with you real soon. Thanks everyone, and thanks again, Lisa. Katie, thanks again for your hosting and keeping an eye on those questions. Have a lovely day, everyone. Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.